Who doesn't love a good folktale? Stories that we tell each other about certain places or things that we thought that we saw, either to entertain, warn, or frighten our friends. Every country and every culture has a rich abundance of folklore. But today we're going to be looking over at one in my neck of the woods, Japan. Specifically, the monsters and things that go bump in the night, the yokai. Today, we are going to be looking into the works of a Mr. Toriyama Sekien, the man behind the creation of several popular Japanese yokai, and his most famous work, the Gazu Hyaki Yagyo, or loosely translated to the Night Parade of the 100 Monsters. So, get some popcorn, dim the lights, and cover yourself in a nice blanket, because tonight we're going to watch the Night Parade. Now, as Toriyama Sekien's book is so long, I'll be breaking this up into a multiple part series, so we're going to be starting part 1 now. Let's start with what a yokai is. Yokai is a catch-all term for a Japanese monster or ghost, and there are actually a few words in Japanese that have a same or similar meaning, like obake or ayakashi. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to be using the more popular term, yokai. A yokai can range from something like an oni, which can appear as a deceptive humanoid, to a flesh monster that appears in temples, smells like garbage, but if you eat its skin will heal all of your illnesses and grant you strength. Pretty much, anything that goes bump in the night can be classified as a yokai to a certain degree. We're going to see a bunch of variations on this term from here forward, so get ready. As to who Toriyama Sekien was, he was a Japanese artist who for a time served the Tokugawa shogunate as an artist, but after retiring turned his attention to the paranormal, sketching famous monsters all throughout Japan and placing a concrete image on them in the public mind that resounds even to this day. The first on this list is the Kodama. These are a type of nature spirit that look like ordinary trees, with the exception of being that they can move around as they like. The Kodama actually lives inside of these trees, making them their homes, and will curse anybody who cuts them down. As such, village elders would tell others which trees had Kodama in them and to avoid cutting them, and this information would then be passed down to the next generation indefinitely. If, however, one were to ignore these warnings and choose to cut the trees anyway, these trees would bleed at the slash. The actual appearance of a Kodama is up to interpretation, and some believe them to be shapeshifters without a true form. Sekien himself claimed that when a tree reached 100 years of age, a divine spirit would begin to inhabit it, and this was the Kodama. There is a similar legend of these creatures in Okinawa, where they are instead called ki-nushi. If you cut a tree, it was customary to give a prayer to the tree before doing so, and that at night you could hear the yelps and cries of ki-nushi, who were not given their proper respect. Tengu are a very broad form of yokai, and there are a fair amount of variations on them as well. They are a type of air spirit, possibly originating as an explanation as to what shooting stars were. They get their name from China, where they were known as Tiangol, and their image of being bird-like monsters likely came from India's Garuda. Now, as to what they actually are is a little bit more complicated. They are both their own race of monster that has bird-like feathers, often those of a kite or a crow, but also sometimes former humans. In the case of Emperor Sutoku, he became a Tengu after a series of betrayals by his family, and his grudge against them turned his soul into a vengeful Tengu spirit. Others become Tengu after death because they were Buddhists, preventing them from going to hell, but not righteous enough to go to heaven. So they fall into what is called the Tengu Road, and transform into these monsters. Many of these former human Tengu would take out their frustration of being unable to pass on to the living, both attacking and possessing them. They would also kidnap young boys and priests and tie them up to high places. If they survived, they would be close to death and rambling insanities. Tengu also had subgroups divided by how powerful they were, with the most powerful being the Dai Tengu. A Dai Tengu is a Tengu that was either old and wise, and as such had accumulated a lot of power and was able to command lesser Tengu, or they were greatly powerful people in life with bad morals that barred them from going to heaven but were too good for hell, and so became a being similar to a god. Dai Tengu are where the image of the red-faced, long-nosed Tengu come from, while lesser Tengu often appear with beaks and more bird-like features. The Yabiku is a mountain god that is responsible for echoes and other odd sounds in the mountains. The creature itself looks to be a cross between a monkey and a dog, and almost always has the same smug face depicted mid-shrug. They are very rarely seen, preferring to simply mimic back what is spoken on the mountains to passerby. There are several legends across Japan about this funky little fella, but all essentially go like this. A woodcutter was walking through the mountains when he suddenly heard a mysterious noise. Thinking that it was a lost traveler, he called out, only for it to respond back with his same voice and call. The frightened man then fled from the mountains. The Yamawaro is a type of Kappa that lives in the mountains of Kyushu, though they do have legends elsewhere in Japan as well. They look like 10-year-old children with thick orange and navy hair on their head, and a layer of fur around their bodies. For the most part, they appear as feral humans, with the exception of having one singular eye in the middle of their face, and many artists also include a Kappa disc on their heads, alluding to their aquatic ancestors. They would play pranks on people performing construction in the mountains, but hated ink lines, so workers would often mark off an area where they would be working with these ink lines in hopes that the Yamawaro leaving them alone. These beings themselves are not fully evil and can be recruited to help in construction if you give them offerings of alcohol and onigiri. Now, you have to do negotiations with these creatures and to be very exact about what you will give them once the job is done. If there are any details that are imprecise, the creature will become incredibly angry and destroy the work that was created, or just attack the other workers. As they are a type of Kappa, they love sumo and harassing livestock, but will also break into people's homes and use their baths. If they do, the grease and filth of their hairy bodies will render any tub they enter to be useless. The Yamauba fits into a classification of yokai that is the homeless. A Yamauba, or old mountain woman, is just that, an old woman who lives alone in the mountains. They appear as a woman, typically an older woman with wild gray hair, or in some regions a young woman with long flowing black hair. There are several variations on what exactly they are and what it is that they do depending on where you are in Japan. Generally, however, if you encounter an old woman Yamauba, they are cannibalistic and will lure travelers and merchants into their homes with feigned kindness, and then as they sleep, kill them and eat them. In some stories, they are also capable of placing curses on people, causing them to fall ill and eventually die, unless the Yamauba itself is killed. In some tales, hunters encountered a young Yamauba and tried to shoot her, only for the creature to deflect the bullets with her hands. Perhaps the most famous Yamauba comes from Japan's golden boy, Kintaro, whose mother was either killed and eaten by a Yamauba, who then raised the child, or the Yamauba was the mother, impregnated by a clap of thunder made by a dragon god. Inugami, or dog gods, are a type of spirit that possesses people. The animal performing this possession is, you guessed it, a dog. Now, this can be both a good thing or a bad thing depending on how the possession took place. A person can willingly take on the possession through a ritual that involves starving a dog by tying it to a tree just out of the reach of food nearby, and then when it's about to go completely feral, cutting its head off, then burying the head at a crossroad for the spirit to become even angrier at its cause of death. Then, a powerful magician could utilize the spirit as a curse against others or enslave it to do his or her bidding for all eternity. Once possessed, a person develops a pain in their chest and limbs and may start to bark and growl like a dog, and they would become incredibly jealous of others. Those that are possessed are called Inugami mochi, or translated to having the Inugami. If a family was possessed by the Inugami, they would attempt to keep it a secret because it was a familial possession, meaning that the descendants of the possessed would meet the same fate. Thus, it was considered a taboo to marry into Inugami mochi families. The only known way to get rid of it was through an exorcism. Nekomata are the spirits of cats that have reached a certain age and whose tails have split into two. It should be noted that there is a separate but similar yokai called a Bakeneko, or ghost cat, that also exists but is not the same. There are two types of Nekomata, mountain and domestic. Mountain Nekomata are large cats that attack and eat people. They can shapeshift into the form of a human in order to lull passersby into a sense of comfort before attacking. Domestic Nekomata were believed to come about from old cats who would essentially just become a monster after a certain age. For a time, this was treated as a fact, and it resulted in cat owners not keeping their pets extended periods of time. There are several famous stories about Nekomata, one of which involves a samurai tasked with solving the poltergeist activity that was occurring at his master's home. He watched several horrific apparitions move to and from the home, and was so terrified that he had asked for the help of priests and shamans to exorcise the home. During one of these visits, the samurai lord's elderly cat appeared with a shikigami in its mouth. The samurai shot it dead and discovered that it had two tails, revealing that it was a Nekomata. The paranormal activity stopped after this. Kappa are an amphibious humanoid race of creatures that inhabit the rivers and watery areas of Japan. They are often depicted as being green and lizard-like with webbed hands and feet. They are generally about the size of a child, hence why their names translate to river child. But there are reports of them in various different heights and statures, with several variations on the Kappa existing. What remains consistent though is that Kappa have an indentation on their head where a kind of dish is, and this dish holds water from their home river or waterway. They also love cucumbers and have been known to pick clean and destroy entire fields in a single night. Sumo wrestling is a favorite pastime of theirs as well, and despite their small size, they are incredibly strong. Kappas are also known to attack people by dragging them into the water, drowning them, and then ripping an organ found in the anus called a shirokodama, which is believed to be where the soul was held. Other variations with Kappa are that their arms can stretch extremely far, they pull pranks on people just for fun, they have a mob-like pack that is led by a tiger Kappa who calls all the shots, and that they can be defeated by removing the water held in their head dish. Despite their fearsome appearance and reputation, Kappa are not exclusively evil creatures, and are known to return favors for good deeds done to them, and saving righteous people from drowning. Kappas are also known as masters of medicine, and are believed to have taught humans the art of bone setting. The Kawa Uso is actually a real thing. They are Japanese river otters, but in legend they are similar to Kitsune and Tanukis. Many small mammals in Japanese myth are capable of shapeshifting into various things after they reach a certain age, and river otters are not exempt from this. Kawauso legends are naturally found where river otters are in Japan, and so there are many legends about them in the Ishikawa prefecture, but their legend extends as far north as Hokkaido. These legends are generally the same throughout, where a Kawauso will take the form of a woman or a child and trick a man into coming close to them. If they are asked questions, they will respond by saying either Oria or Aria. This often confuses the man who came to help, and either the Kawauso then vanishes to frighten the man or lures him elsewhere where he is killed by the creature. The Akaname, or literally filth licker, is a child-sized creature with a deformed head, large saucer-like eyes, claws on its hands, and a long tongue. They are often depicted as being red-skinned because Aka, in their name, means red in Japanese. This creature lurks around bathhouses and outhouses that are not cleaned and have an accumulation of filth. They manifest from the detritus and unclean energy in these areas and then feed off of the filth in them. As their name suggests, they will then lick the filth from the bathhouse to feed themselves. Traditionally, they are not dangerous, but serve as a frightening warning about a lack of cleanliness. However, a variation of the tale exists that once they manifest, they can take the form of a woman. Once they have, they'll go into the homes of people and lick them until they are nothing but a skeleton. Tanuki, or more specifically Bake Tanuki, meaning ghost tanuki, are just that. Tanuki with supernatural powers. A tanuki is a large mammal found in Japan that resembles the cross between a raccoon and a dog. As such, they are often translated as raccoon dogs. Tanuki are most notably shapeshifters that love causing pranks. However, where a kitsune fox spirit is often considered quick-witted and clever, a tanuki is considered a bit more foolish. However, they are also considered to be superior in terms of shapeshifting. While a fox has 7 disguises it can use, a tanuki has 8. Other traits of Bake Tanuki are that they have massive testicles. If you've ever seen a Tanuki statue, you may have missed their enormous balls that cover the ground and thought that it was just fur. There are stories of Tanuki using their scrotum to expand over vast areas of land, or fleeing them over their back, giving them the appearance of carrying a sack, which they are. They also drum on their bellies, making a pom poko pom pom sound that is believed to be the source of a paranormal phenomena called Tanuki Bayashi, which is a mysterious music heard when walking along paths. There are several named Tanuki such as Danzaburo or Shibayamon, and even tales of all-out Tanuki Wars that have taken place. Perhaps the most famous Tanuki tale is that of Bonboku Chagama. At the Morenji temple, the head priest took his kettle out to make tea and place it over the fire. Once he did, the kettle yelped and sprouted arms and legs, having been a Tanuki in disguise. The priest and his apprentice subdued the Tanuki and forced it back into being a kettle. Then they sell it to an unwary rag merchant. The Tanuki reveals itself to the merchant and the pair strike a deal. The merchant won't burn the Tanuki over a fire and won't lock it away in a stuffy box, and will also feed it so long as the Tanuki is willing to do tricks and put on a show for people. Through this, the merchant becomes extremely wealthy as people watch in disbelief as the half kettle, half animal performs tricks. The man then returns the kettle back to the temple where the Tanuki would help around the property, and supposedly still does to this day. Kama Itachi, or scythe weasels, are a weasel-like yokai that attack passersby on paths at night. They show up by riding dust devils and attack swiftly with scythe-like appendages on their paws. They appear all throughout Japan, but especially in areas where there are sharp, frigid winds. They attack by riding the winds and cutting people with their scythe appendages for no more reason than it being what they enjoy doing. They sometimes appear in a trio of weasels and are described as evil wind gods, strong enough to slice off entire limbs painlessly, and then putting medicine on the wounds so that one is completely unaware of the damage that they have just taken. The cuts are so precise that they can leave massive gashes on the flesh without spilling a drop of blood. Alternatively, in some legends, the Kami Itachi drinks the blood that would have been spilled, which is why none appears. Amikiri, or net cutter, is a mysterious creature that appears as a cross between a bird, a snake, and a lobster. These creatures cut holes in nets with their claws, or so it is believed because they are not given a description by Toriyama Sekien. However, there is a legend about them. A fishing hamlet was being targeted by the Amikiri, who would cut holes in fishermen's nets and was a massive nuisance. A young fisherman, thinking to outsmart the creature, took his nets home with him and hid them within his house. The next day, he woke up covered in mosquito bites as the Amikiri had followed him home and destroyed his mosquito net in vengeance. Kitsune-bi, or foxfires, is actually not something limited to just Japan, and you may know it by its more common Western name, the will-o-wisp. These lights would often be seen at nighttime, floating above the ground in groups from as small as 1 to as large as the hundreds. The light that they gave off was often described as looking like a paper lantern light. The light that they gave off was often described as looking like a paper lantern light, and they were able to simply all vanish at once, only to reappear in large quantities. They could be found essentially anywhere, but most often they appeared on hills where no roads or people were, or along trails where they were said to follow travelers. As to why they were called Kitsune-bi, it was believed that these lights were caused by foxes in order to trick people. If a traveler on a lonely road suddenly saw a path illuminated by a row of lights, they were likely to follow it, believing that it would lead them to a town or village. Only only for all of the lights to suddenly vanish and leave the traveler alone in the dark woods. And that's where I'm going to leave you all today. Look forward to the next part here coming out soon. For now though, check out all the socials, check out the Patreon, check out the podcast, do all the YouTube stuff, and I'll hopefully catch you guys all soon. Stay safe during this spooky season. Keep your chin up. Bye-bye.